Okay, I think we are ready to start. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's paper. It is my great pleasure to introduce Ellen Muehlberger, who's a professor of history at the University of Michigan. She studied religious studies in Western Michigan University and in Bloomington, and then she obtained her PhD in religious studies in 2008 from Indiana University. Before joining Michigan, she's also been an assistant professor at DePauw University. Her work focuses on the history of late antique Christianity, and in particular on the rhetorical and historiographical methods Christian adopted as they shifted from being the minority to being dominant. She specializes on topics such as angels or notorious heretics and their death or the lives of saintly women. And she worked on sources in several languages, including Greek, Latin, Syriac, Coptic, and Hebrew. Her list of publication is extensive and includes, for instance, her 2019 book, The Moment of Reckoning, Imagine Death and Its Consequences in Late Ancient Christianity, or her 2013 book, Angels in Late Ancient Christianity. I would also like to mention two books published this year. One that is fresh out of the press, that is entitled Things Unseen, Essays on Evidence, Knowledge, and the Late Ancient Word, and the volume that she edited together with Bradley Storin, Discipline, Authority, and Text in Late Ancient Religion. Besides her work, her research, and teaching, Ellen is also engaged in several committees. For instance, she has been the chair of the North American Patristic Society and is the editor of Journal of Early Christian Studies. Today, Ellen will present a paper entitled Character Building, Tracing the Voice of Mary of Egypt. Ellen, the floor is all yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. First off, everyone for coming, and secondly, the team, Georgia, Marion, Andy, and Dan for inviting me. I've been watching the TeTras from afar and also the recordings on the website for a while, and I'm just excited to get to actually present here. What I'm presenting today is part of this new book, which is called Things Unseen. It's a paperback from the University of California Press. As you see, it's very small. It's cheap. But here's the good news. It is also going to be open access in about a week. So you'll be able to go to the University of California website and just get the PDF. So that's thanks to both California and my university, which made that open access. And it's nicer because people can read it, they can cite it. You don't have to spend $150 to get a book. It's amazing. So this is what I'm going to talk through today is a sort of stripped down version of one of the chapters in here, but there are 4 chapters, not all about the same topics. This book is written as if I had been asked to give a lecture series and then publish the lecture series, but I was never asked to give a lecture series. So it's me faking a lecture series and then writing it about things that I was interested in. And mostly it's about evidence and how early Christians came to evidence of things that they already believed or things that they already knew. Today's talk, though, is about the life of Mary of Egypt and maybe where that character came from. I would like to share my screen, Dan, if you'll give me permission to share my screen so I can share my slides. Okay, let's see if I can see. Oh, there's the share button. Technology, it still gets us every time, right? There's that. And let me make it a slideshow. There we go. Can you see the slides? Excellent, excellent. All right. So the life of Mary of Egypt, a famous text, like most hagiography, is difficult to date with some precision. It was cited by another Christian writer in the 8th century, so most readers will locate it in the 7th century. And that date would roughly square with estimations from ancient people who assigned authorship to one Sophronius, who was a bishop in Jerusalem in the 630s. In the life of Mary of Egypt, an anonymous narrator introduces a character, a monk called Zosimus, who, when he arrives at middle age, is looking for more extreme models of piety for himself. And he had been disappointed by what he'd found so far, thinking that there was no greater challenge out there for him. And he wonders aloud, is there a man to be found in the desert who has surpassed me? As it turns out, there was another person who had surpassed him, but it was not a man. Zosimus traveled for many years looking for this excellent figure before he encounters Mary, who is a former prostitute who reluctantly gives up her life story to him after he tries to persuade her by chasing her down. She says that having lived a dissolute life as a young adult, she had an encounter with the Virgin Mary at some point and began a new path. So by the time we meet her, as Zosimus is telling the story, she's been living in the desert for 47 years. She leads a feral existence. She's unclothed, as many artists, including Kenton Massis, represent. She's often naked. She's got long hair to cover herself. The life says that her body is black, as if tanned by the scorching of the sun. And almost as soon as he meets her, Zosimus realizes that Mary really has surpassed him. He gets her story, and he goes back to the monastery to write it down, but she remains in the desert and keeps on living. This Mary and her story was transmitted and translated into multiple contexts in Byzantium and beyond. And today, I'd like to show you where I think she came from, not geographically or historically, but textually. So there are 3 sections to my talk. First, I'm going to show you some features of this character Mary in the life of Mary of Egypt, because she's distinctive for speaking at length in first person and also having some special features of that first person speech. Then I'll show you how those features square with the expectations for an ancient writing exercise called speech and character. And I'm going to do that by taking you through the model of a very famous model of speech and character by Libanius of Antioch, a 4th century orator. He has a speech for a prostitute who has come to her senses. And I think that that establishes a character that eventually shows up as Mary in this life. In case that seems like a stretch, there's a 3rd section, and I'd like to show you in that section a late ancient text that confirms, I think, what I'm arguing. It was edited by Eugenio Amato, and it's classified as a pseudo-Severan text, so it's not actually from Severus, but it's been attributed to Severus. And I think I think of it as an anonymous sequel to Libanius's model speech, and in essence, the same character who persists to become Mary in the life of Mary. I have some theories about how this character, once it was created by Libanius and boys who practiced doing that model, managed to persist in different guises in Christian literature, but I can speculate about that during the question and answer period. So here we are at part 1. We're going to look first at the character of Mary in the life of Mary of Egypt. This character has predecessors in early Christian literature. So Cyril of Scythopolis had a story about a Mary who lived by herself in a cave in the desert, and she left the church when men paid her too much attention, and she lives for 18 years on the food and water that she brings with her, but she doesn't do much speaking in Cyril's report. There's a shorter version of this kind of woman in John Moskos's Spiritual Meadow. She is a penitent woman and she has some sexual temptation, so she flees away and she survives unsheltered in the desert only with the things that she's brought with her. Now, stories like these closely align with the pattern that's taken up in the life of Mary of Egypt, but the life of Mary of Egypt is both wilder and bolder than these predecessors, so it's not just a repeat of what's come before. What makes this Mary different is the extent and detail of her speech. She talks in the life a lot, revealing much more of herself than other female characters like the ones I just mentioned. And the repentance she undertakes to get out to the desert is far more extensive than any other Christian woman I know of, and really almost any other character from late ancient Christian literature. She was, sorry, there's a little fly in my apartment, so I'm just kind of moving that away from my face. Forgive me. She was, as she tells Zosimus, absolutely devoted to being lewd and lascivious and vulgar. Here's a quote. "The truth is," she admits, "I had an insatiable passion and an uncontrollable lust to wallow in filth." So she was really dirty. In fact, at one point in the story, she talks her way on, she's at a harbor and she talks her way onto a ship full of men who are about to set sail. And then she confesses that she forces them into unnatural acts. So she teaches sailors how to be dirty, right? Like this is a very dirty woman. Then, because of her dedication to repentance, she becomes so holy that when Zosimus goes to see her, at one point he sees her levitating. Later in the story, he sees her walk on water to cross the River Jordan, not once, but twice. So, she's not on the stormy sea with a bunch of disciples, but she is doing things that Jesus did, stepping out onto the surface of the waters, which is our story's way of saying she is so holy that she is doing now Christ-like things. And yet, in the story, she is not associated with any church. In fact, she tells Zosimus that she was physically repelled from the church. So at a festival, she tries to enter the church and she fails. And while she's on the threshold, she can see other people inside. So I have a little Here's the citation from the Life of Mary of Egypt. This is Maria Cooley's translation. She says, I tried to join the crowd going in and force my way into the entrance, pushing forward, but being pushed back. Eventually, with great trouble and grief, wretched woman that I am, I approached the door through which one enters the church. But as soon as I stepped on the threshold of the door, all the other people entered unhindered, but some kind of divine power held me back. Though the church received many others without obstacle, it refused entrance to me alone, miserable woman that I am. And just as if a large company of soldiers were arrayed for this purpose, with orders to prevent me from entering, so did some kind of overwhelming power hold me back, and once more I was standing in the courtyard. She truly never gets into the church. She's hindered by this force, and she twice labels herself and says the reason is I'm a wretched woman or a miserable woman. And those labels, I think, point to what's wrong according to the story. The church doesn't want to accept her not because she's a sinful person, other sinful people get in, but because she's a sinful woman. Waiting tearfully in the courtyard, she encounters the Virgin Mary, who tells her, yes, you should be repenting, but the church is not the place for you. The desert is. And then off Mary goes. Our Mary, Mary of Egypt, goes off to the desert, and she never returns to a church. What she's left with, and what we're left with, is her story. It follows a specific pattern. Once Zosimus asks her questions, she speaks at length about her experiences, and she follows a chronological formula. She tells Zosimus about her current life, how she's managing. She retraces her past and laments it in the ways that I've talked about. And then she tells him about the repentance she underwent, the changes that she felt, and the way that she looks out towards the future. She even makes a couple of pretty telling observations about how unbelievable her story is, or how unexpected her story is. And it is an extraordinary story, but it's patterned on something very common. That chronological pattern I just pointed out is something that every writer in the late ancient Mediterranean encountered in school. So here we are at part 2, where the pattern comes from, or titled Boys Writing as Women. Imagine with me a moment, it's a morning, say, in late antiquity, and you're in a rhetorical classroom, and a boy of like 13 or 14 has come in to join the teacher and the circle of students. The teacher has given everyone a kind of writing assignment, and this boy that we're following will work on that writing assignment for several sessions, maybe composing something, trying it out loud, getting feedback from the teacher and maybe the other boys in the room, and then trying it again. It's a weird task, but he starts on it, and the task he has is to compose a speech in first person that answers the question, what would a prostitute who has come to her senses say? Or what would a prostitute who has become wise say? Now, this isn't like an open-ended prompt. He can't just write anything. Instead, it's a narrower invitation to answer in the format known as speech and character. This is a genre of imaginary writing that boys practiced, and it was a staple of rhetorical education in antiquity. Students are given questions that specify a character and a situation, like the prostitute who comes to her senses, or the eunuch who falls in love, and then asked to compose a speech in first-person voice that would capture that character's reaction and words and maybe their prospects. The implicit assumption of is in a situation that is unexpected or unpredictable, or maybe even stands opposite to their nature. In this case, what we're supposed to assume is that a prostitute could not possibly come to her senses, could not gain wisdom, meaning that as a type of person, she's not capable of the quality that the prompting question has said that the boy should attach to her. And that quality in the question is Sophronius. Now, it's difficult to pin down in translation, but I've talked about her coming to her senses, but having acquired Sophronius could be like also becoming wise, or turning away from prostitution, or even becoming self-possessed, becoming an agent herself. Whatever it is, Sophronius constantly gets praise in ancient philosophical classrooms and texts, in ascetic contexts in Christianity, in friendship letters between men. It's what the best of men say that other men should have or act like. Whether it's even possible for women is an open question, but it's definitely not possible for a prostitute, the woman who the boy is supposed to assign this very quality to. Libanius, as a teacher, writes a model for students about how they should accomplish the feat of speaking as this woman who has become wise. And part of what they need to do is answer in a chronological order. They're supposed to register her present situation, then look to her past and look how things have changed to create the present, and then think about what's going to happen to her in the future. The speaker, the first person speaker in Libanius's model, once existed without Sophrosune. She had no, self-possession or no perception of her own actions and their consequences. But once the conditions of the prompt are established, once that switch has been flipped, that she's become wise, all of a sudden she does possess wisdom as fully as any philosopher, so that she can take into account all of the phases of her life, the past, the present, and the future. Now, Libanius, when this switch is flipped, he does some very interesting grammatical things, things that if you're a person into Greek philology, you'll really appreciate. So the first couple of verbs that he uses for her are deponent, meaning, they're active. Obviously, deponent verbs are active, but they're also not exactly right. They're not exactly the normal verb. She presents several commands where she's not commanding someone else to do something else, but she's sort of the object of the command. So she's sort of talking to herself in a way. There's some very odd things that happen. I'm going to show you just one though. And I put the Greek down at the bottom. She, in the space of about 40 words, uses exactly the same Greek verb over like 9 times, 9 different times to talk about her past. So this is the text here. She talks about what she used to be like. She's like, well, I used to pluck the rose. I used to train in shamelessness. I used to dream of even worse. I used to work hard to make the nighttime even more shameful than the day. Still entangled, and like here you can picture her in the embrace of one man, and she's looking over the shoulder and trying to find another guy that she can hunt nearby. She used to joke, gossiping under her breath to a neighbor. I used to possess the robber. I used to love the disowned one. I used to have a house full of inappropriate men. So, on the one hand, this is a woman giving a speech. On the other hand, this is Libanius being like, look how clever I can be by repeating this verb form over and over again. It also reveals the new character of the speaker to us. Once she has Sophrosune now, she all of a sudden has a set of words about her past. Words for naming what she did, words for confessing what she did, words for visualizing what she did. Her voice gets loosed and she realizes how she was an agent when the whole definition of being a woman, a porne or a prostitute, is that you wouldn't recognize these things. You wouldn't have the kind of moral responsibility for the things that you're doing. But once she does, these claims come out of her rapid fire, where she keeps using that same verb form over again. Now, none of this speech, is really possible according to the norms that were shared among students and their teachers about women, what they're like in general, and what fornicating women are like in particular. Women who fornicate are not self-possessed, they don't act according to reason, and the verbal magic of this exercise, giving her a voice like this, has turned her into an agent, not just for the moment when she realizes what she's been doing, but retroactively back in the past when she was taking those actions. So she looks real. She's a speaking voice, but she inhabits a perspective that could never have happened if she were actually the type of the thing that she's been specified to be. So Libanius here creates a kind of two-tier magical person. She's both real and unreal, possible and impossible. That character is otherworldly in almost precisely the same way that a holy desert woman who used to be a lascivious, lewd person is otherworldly. This speaker, like Mary of Egypt, is unique, odd, and captivating. She speaks at length, but it's Libanius who does her voice. Having been put together then also by students who are trying to model this exercise, probably on hundreds of occasions by, 13 or 14-year-old boys who are trying to write. I think that she does not slip away after these boys create her. Once the exercise is put to the side, she doesn't just disappear from their minds. She's an impossible woman who's quite captivating, and she persists in icons, in stories, in exemplars, in male people's logic about women and what they're like. She populates also early Christian texts about women, even those that present women speaking in their own voices. Now, this sounds like speculation on my part. I'm not making a literary connection between these two things, but I want to think about how a made-up character could persist. And for this, I want to show you a text in antiquity that I think represents the persistence of this woman who is at first the porne who acquires Sophrosune, but then becomes the repentant prostitute saint. So here we are in part 3. We're going to talk about a text that I call the anonymous sequel. Um, and I'm going to show you some quotations from it. These are not all in one piece, but I will be reading all of these separately. These are excerpts. So the repentant prostitute who's been created and materialized in Libanius's model exercise lingers in the imagination of male writers who are trained to speak in her voice when they were boys. A fascinating text from the 5th or 6th century has been preserved in a single manuscript from Madrid. Instead of composing another answer to the same prompt that Libanius was answering, namely, what would a prostitute come to her senses say, this writer marks his work as a different genre because he gives it a different title. It's more like a title of a declamation, actually. He identifies the speaker and the persons to whom she is speaking. It's the prostitute who has become wise to her pursuing lovers. In just a few pages of Greek, it's like 4 or 5 pages long in facing page. This writer, very likely a Christian and perhaps a teacher, maybe just a grown man. Excuse me, I said Greek, I mean Latin. It's not in Greek. Forgive me. Actually, it is in Greek. I'm confusing this with another text that I talk about in the chapter. This one's in Greek. He might have been a Christian, he might have been a teacher, or he might have just been a grown man reflecting on his past writing exercises. Creates a kind of second story for this woman later in her life. So we pick up after her story as a model who a prostitute has just become wise, and we pick up a little later and she's now on different ground. So the thing opens with the first line here that I have here. She says, "Again has the time come for erotic battles. Again, the terrible demon who has resented me wages war against Sophrosune." So the repetition in these lines, it's, again and again, draws us to where she's at. She's already been through the wars. She acquired Sophrosune, repented, and some time has passed, and demons are starting to attack her, trying to take away her wisdom. The opening lines actually, I think, prime us to read her account as a plot or as aligning with a plot that pervades late ancient ascetic literature by naming her situation as a battle and by invoking the presence of a demon attacking her. The speaker seems to narrate for herself a monk's situation or a holy person's situation. She is intent on her discipline, but she's tempted, and the demon is trying to thwart her by entering her thoughts and by planting suggestions to redirect her good intentions. Now, a monk's struggle is usually to master those thoughts and to defeat demons by mastering the thoughts. This woman's struggle is different. So she retains the quality of Sophrosune. Her mind and her good intentions are intact, but the demon evolves a new method to attack her. As she explains, she says, this is the second piece, because he could not get me to waver from the wise things I set out to do, he seems to have armed others against us. The demon working on her chooses a different approach, not her mind, which is resolutely wise, but the people around her. In a few short words, that opening tells us that we're dealing with a woman who has a discipline like a monk, but she's fighting a different battle. She has something more than most early Christian men had to manage, and that is the ideas and actions of the people around her. As she reflects, she says, I had changed, but everybody still figured that I was worthless. As much as she tries, the esteem of other people about her remains low, and she says, all people categorize me as shameful. She has repented and acts differently, but the people around her have not. And regardless of what she does, or whatever she is attempting to do, she is still the thing she used to be, a porne or a prostitute, and thus capable of only evil. Now, being stereotyped in this way already does its own kind of harm socially, but beyond that, the speech registers the social consequences of her getting stereotyped, as other people's opinions of her place limits on her. It's not just former customers or other citizens that shun her. Instead, the shunning reaches even to the church, and she knows that quite deeply. This is the third quotation that's on your slide. She says, it's clear that it's happening to us, or to me, too. priests shut us out and scare us off from the divine word, however they can. When I was reading this, this was where I started to think, oh, this is Mary of Egypt. She's turned away from the church. The very place where a reformed prostitute, a woman committed to Sophronius in her life, might find welcome and like-mindedness among people who recognize redemption and repentance as good things, even sacraments, and I mean the church, that's the place that she is shooed away from as if she were a pest. The hypothetical woman in this anonymous sequel discovers that she's caught not in the act, but in the lingering appearance of her past acts, and therefore she's discounted. And she says, what should I do? Even if I have Sophronius, nobody will believe it. She knows I wouldn't get equal treatment even if I lived according to wisdom and in a manner that pleased you. What's more, we can hear in the voice of this character, we can hear in this voice the character who later appears as Mary of Egypt. She's repentant. She's so holy as to be able to act like Christ, and yet she's entirely shut out of the esteem of others and participation, not just in the church, but in society itself. Now, it may seem odd to think that a saint in a popular hagiography like the Life of Mary is a literary creation that started out in the writing exercises of what are, middle grade boys, like 13, 14-year-old boys. But the image of the impossible woman that got created in those exercises is indelible in the imagination. And the pull of her suspended repentance. Yes, she's repented, but she's still evil. Yes, she's a sex worker, but now she's holy, is almost irresistible to the Christian men in antiquity who wanted to represent women. If there's any doubt that Mary in the Life of Egypt spoke with this kind of ventriloquized voice, that she's yet another instance of a man imagining the impossible woman from the exercises and from the sequel, the narrative details in the Life of Mary of Egypt also clue us in. So there's a couple of little parts of the story where I'm like, oh, this is a bit too heavy-handed. And somebody is trying to make the point that this is a woman being ventriloquized by a man. So first in the story, we only hear the Life of Mary, or the Mary of Egypt's voice, because Zosimus has chased her down and begged for it. He follows her, he pursues her into the desert. She warns him at one point. She's like, look, I'm naked, I can't talk, and she turns away from him. He then gives her his cloak so that she can speak. Now, ostensibly in the story, this is about modesty. How could she speak if she were naked? But this is a situation where a man literally hands his mantle to a woman so she can speak. So it seems a little heavy-handed, like I said. Other details in the Life of Mary of Egypt point in this same direction. So at their first meeting, Mary and Zosimus have this odd choreography where they first kneel, one then the other kneels, and then they both prostrate themselves on the ground, and then they get back up before she eventually speaks. So they kind of go through a ritual together before she's able to speak. And when she does eventually say that she will speak, she says, I have been commanded to be obedient, so I will willingly do your bidding, meaning I will talk just because you're telling me to talk. When she happens at other points in the story to be praying by herself, Zosimus can't make out what she's saying, he says, because she mumbles and her voice was not heard to utter articulate sounds. So her speaking by herself in the story, nobody can understand her, but once Zosimus is there to repeat her story, all of a sudden it's totally legible. So those details in the frame of the story are part of the plot, but I think they're also literary flourishes that help us understand that she's being ventriloquized. She can't be heard unless a man draws out her voice. And the bare fact that this saint's life can be read at all points in that direction because we know her only because Zosimus went looking for her and then came back to tell her story. Those are the three parts. Again, they're relatively bare bones. I'm here to answer questions, but my thought is the impossible woman that boys created by doing that speaking exercise stays in the imagination, and she shows up at different points in Christian literature, including as this repentant, overly sexual being, Mary of Egypt, who's now so holy that she's like Christ. I'm looking forward to your questions and comments. I think that's it. I'll stop sharing the screen for now. Is that right? Okay. Oh, wow, there's a ton of you. Oh my goodness, so many people. Hello, everybody.
So many people indeed. Thank you very much, Alan, for a fascinating talk. We have time for questions. So if you have any, you can raise your hand digitally or just manually. I might be able to see. or you can also put a question, write a question in the chat if you want to and you cannot speak up. Well, I might just start us off. Well, one thing was that it reminded me. I worked in an Afghan project for a while on another case like this. One of those prostitutes, repentant prostitute, which was Thais, which is a very different case in the sense that she barely has a voice. And I was checking while you were talking, and she's actually said she's not even allowed to pray until she repents. So there's also this kind of idea. Well, I have so many questions. I don't even know where to start. Maybe just very briefly in terms of very basics. This Madrid manuscript. Can you do you know anything more about its sort of? You said 5th or 6th century. Do you know anything more about its exact origins, and sort of more about the context in which this text was created?
I actually don't. So the things that I'm saying about it, that I think it's a Christian person, and I think it's probably the fact that I think it's somebody who's Christian. He talks about, her being prevented from the divine word, and there's a couple other mentions of ritual that I'm like, oh, this seems Christian. Although if you weren't looking for those details, you might think, oh, this is just somebody practicing a declamation of some sort and doing it in that same let me set myself a difficult prompt. I'm going to talk about the cat that acts like a dog, or the porne who has Sophronius, or has become wise. Other than that, it's in the appendix to this. Eugenio Amato did an edition of the sort of writing exercises, or sort of rhetorical stuff attributed. It's a very small volume. I wish I could remember the year, but attributed to Severus, and it's in the back there as he's got a title in it that has something to do with he titles it as if it's a speech and character, and I think it's not exactly answering a question, it's more giving it a regular speech, like a declamation. So other than it's only one copy, I don't know anything else about it, unfortunately.
Okay. I'm told Sabrina, you had a question.
Yeah, unmuted. Thank you, Ellen. That was really fascinating. I was wondering if, okay, your point of departure is then Libanius. Could there have been, could it have been an exercise in Libanius because it comes from somewhere else even earlier than that? Is there maybe another point of departure? I don't know if you have encountered anything that could have been potentially, maybe not the source, but something about a prostitute that could have then landed as an exercise. And then I have another bizarre question. So you spoke about the fact that the author is sometimes very heavy-handed, and at some point you mentioned that she's a really dirty girl, and she even teaches the Marines to be even dirtier. And I was wondering, because it's a very big interest of mine at the moment, if you think that in this kind of text where really the characters are really, they're more holy and also worse in their defaults, in their mistakes, in their flaws, they're worse than in other hagiographic discourses maybe, and they're more holy because the deeper they go into the problems, the higher they go when they're holy. Do you think there is any humor in that?
I'll take the second question first. Yes, totally. I think that partially what we're doing is we're drawing characters, right? Like, so, I'm trying to think of a character that is common, or maybe Star Wars. I don't know if Star Wars is common or not, but like, Darth Vader, like the evil people. Darth Vader, you don't see him and think, gosh, I wonder if he's evil. He has on a black helmet. You can't see his face, so I think partially what we're doing is drawing characters, but also, I think many of the saints are the effective stereotype. So, there is an exercise in creating a commonplace or a stereotype of someone, and ancient writers practiced making characters out of a few details. I think the problem comes with when we are trying to reconstruct, like trying to study as in a historical sense a culture, and then you encounter, half the population is typed this way. Women in early Christian texts don't tend to be very complex characters. They tend to be typed a little bit, and even to the point of like this is not just early Christian, but I'm thinking about Julia Hillner's piece about the empresses and the letters, and her pointing out that oftentimes letters are written in women's voices, but they do things like this is not what she said. I'm now paraphrasing, but things like, I, as a woman, I'm sitting here thinking about my woman's body and how strange it is to have a curvy body. I don't even have a curvy, but like the kind of heavy-handedness that
Yeah.
a writer who is trying to be someone else will use to signal that they understand that character. So yes, it's both humor, but I think it's also typing. And I think we think of stereotyping as maybe a negative thing, but I think that ancient writers practiced it all the time as a positive thing. Well, that's how you represent someone, right? So to go to your earlier question, I don't even think Libanius is the source of this writing exercise. I think he's an excellent example of it. And gosh, I mean, he's so good. Those model exercises are so good at him both showing this is what a student should probably do, and him also being like, I'm the best at it, and let me show you the most absolutely clever way to make this thing alive. So I would love to know about other writing exercises. I wish that I could go back and maybe tell everybody, save every exercise that you do as a child, because I'd love to see them all. I do think that
I'm pretty sure that at school I was never asked to enter the
right?
class of prostitute.
But I think the things that we learn how to do as children stay with, I, as an academic, so as between the years that I was 13 and 18, in the United States, there's I guess it's a sport, it's an intellectual sport of debate and forensics. And I was a very specific kind of debater. I was a debater that was on the negative side. So you'd look at a case, you'd figure out what was wrong with it, and you would say, here, this can't be the case. Here are the reasons why this is wrong. Let me tell you what's right. And Sabrina, every article I have ever written as an academic, you can see that pattern. I can't get away from it. It's because of what I trained as, right? So if you're a 13 or 14-year-old boy and you're trained not just to speak as a woman who is a sex worker, come to her senses, but lots of other women too, you'll develop a sense of what women are like. And the longer argument in the book is that practice helped male writers not encounter women as real humans. And it helps me understand why early Christian literature does not have a lot of human women in it. It has a lot of female characters, but it doesn't have complex humans who are pious and going through things in the same way that male characters or male writers are. That is a long answer to your question, but I wonder if it answers your question.
Yeah, it does answer my question, and I'm really looking forward to reading the book. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Mara first and then Julie. Oh, no, you didn't have a question?
No, I was just, vigorously saying yes with nodding
Okay.
yes with my head.
Listen for. Okay. Julie.
All right, thank you. Hello, everyone. Hello, Ellen. Great to meet you. Thank you so much for the talk. Very fascinating, and I'm glad I have this sneak peek into your new book, which I will also go and read with a lot of interest. I have sort of two questions. I mean, you get to pick if you want which one you'll answer. The first one is about potentially. So I'm really fascinated by your pointing towards the exercises as a place of where Mary came from. I'm used to thinking about her as coming more from sort of the biblical context and the Gospels and the prostitutes represented in or the women represented in the Gospels. So I'm just wondering, or I wanted to ask how you see those two contexts, if they are related, and how that figures into your story. And then the other question was about what you said about the anonymous sequel, which is, I didn't know about this text at all. It's really fascinating. And I'm struck by the fact that it apparently, as far as understood from your talk, focuses on the social esteem, which is interesting to me because the way I've thought about Mary is precisely this sort of typical withdrawal from the world. I mean, she's completely isolated, and also when Zosimas encounters her, she tries to run, right? She doesn't want the social esteem, and for many of the Christian saints, the virtue their virtue precisely consists of their not wanting social esteem, not wanting praise. That's, of course, a big paradox in context of sanctity in general. So that's not really a question, I guess, but I was just wondering what you think of that.
No, it's very,
Thank you.
so same as before, I'm going to start with the second one first. So, yeah, the anonymous, I'm calling it the anonymous sequel. Eugenio Amato gave it a different name, but I just think of it as the follow-up. It is wild because it is social. And as you're pointing out, like that's not at all what happens with these holy women who go off into the desert. I'll confess as a modern person who lives in a female body, it was painful to read because you see all the different ways that stereotypes come, I'm not a former sex worker, but like all the different ways that stereotypes come at you about your status, your past actions, all these sorts of things. It's an extremely astute text. I know that people like to say, oh, this ancient thing is so modern as a point of praise, but it felt very modern to me. So I'll be interested to hear what you think after you get a chance to read it. The first one, I think it's both and. I think definitely Christians are primed by various Marys, but especially Mary, Jesus's friend, who may or may not be Mary Magdalene, but Mary, the repentant woman. They're primed by that to know that there are repentant women, and of course, the repentant woman is a stereotype in other places. I just think it's both and the thing that really clicked it for me was how much Mary of Egypt speaks and the way that the chronological pattern of what she addresses follows the typical chronological pattern of a speech and character. I think also overall how can I say this? Well, I'll just say it transparently. The genesis of that chapter was me as an American living through an election 10 years ago, where the female candidate was saying very rational. You can disagree with them, politically you might have disagreements with her, but like very rational, very normal things that a politician would say. The male candidate was saying absolutely unhinged, off the wall things. And the response from people was, well, the female is very clearly crazy and the guy is the person that we should follow. And I was very interested in how people's preconceived sort of patterns for what a woman looks like when she speaks versus what a man looks like, how those were working. I obviously am not a US politician. I can't address anything modern, but I can work it out in my own my own subject. So that was, if you're sensing, gosh, Ellen is dealing with the Clinton versus Trump election in this chapter, that is absolutely what I'm dealing with and sort of trying to work out for myself. Like, how is it that I was telling some people on the call before we got started that just this morning there is an op-ed published in the New York Times, like a major paper of record in the United States, the title of which is, "Did Women Ruin the Workplace?" And they're legitimately asking that question, like, did the presence of women change the workplace so terribly? And I was just like, are we really doing this? So that's the context in which my questions about the ancient world arise. So definitely both and I'm not saying that the biblical context is not there at all. I'm just like, also, how did Christian men also trained in the system of rhetoric, they got trained to think this way? How does it influence their thinking, particularly when they're dealing with people who are not like themselves? That too was a long answer, but I wonder if it answers your question.
It does, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay, Toda Satoshi.
Do you hear me? Okay. I'm very sorry to say, first of all, I'm not very good at speaking in English, so please allow me to speak slowly. And And my question is predetermined. Even before listening to your lecture. So I'm very sorry. My question is totally beside your lecture, I'm afraid. But in any case, my question is concerned with the knowledge the author of the life of Mary the Egyptian had about the brothel in Alexandria. Because I'm asking this question because a scholar whose name is Hans Georg Beck, who was German Byzantinist of the 20th century, he writes in his book, Das Byzantinische Jahrtausend, which I translated into Japanese, actually. And he said, in my rough translation, hardly anywhere else than in the beautiful story of of Mary the Egyptian. One hears about the praxis of Alexandrian brother in Alexandria. This is what Beck says, and I'd like to ask your view. In your view, is it correct that the author of the life of Mary the Egyptian had real knowledge of the brothel in Alexandria or not? That is my question.
Thank you for your question. And before I answer it, I'll say the reason we're doing this in English is because I don't speak Japanese. So it's not at all, it's my fault, not yours. And the number of languages on this call, like I speak Italian. That's the only one. So I am the one who's lacking here. So I don't know necessarily much about the life of Mary of Egypt and whether it originated in Alexandria.
Yes, this is a
very good, very good.
Yeah.
So I think that it's entirely possible that the writer knows about brothels in general. In much the same way I myself don't partake in anything but alcohol, but there's a marijuana dispensary probably 500 yards down the street from me. I know about it. I know who goes. I know what they sell. So I think that ancient people knew about sex work and knew about women who had been in those situations, in part because I think the financial circumstances of women meant that that was a kind of work that was available. So I wish I had a good answer. I don't have a definitive answer, but it's possible that somebody else on the call actually does know this for sure. So I'm wondering, I don't want to pick on you, Julie, because you know more about the life of Mary of Egypt, but maybe you do know the answer, or anyone else who knows the answer.
Thank you very much. Anyway, thank you for giving me your impression.
Very good. And Mata has just put up a recent PhD. Oh, excellent. Gosh, thank you.
Yeah, I also seem to recall he's published, not extensively because he's relatively young, but he has published on the topic. And the PhD dissertation was about the role of porne. Well, not really porne, but the aiterai. But it was like there was a lot about the social conceptualization of such characters, and so it was really insightful. Although I don't really remember it by heart. But this is someone who might know.
Cool.
Don't know.
Okay.
Great.
Actually, my question was, what should I say? Rather concerned with the knowledge of Christian author about the brothel. That's all. Okay.
And to that, I can say, Christians know about it all. I think, even monks, right? Like they're pretty far removed from historical documents, but even in the apothegmata, you get these stories about men who know what it means to look at a woman. And they're, oh, you looked at that woman over there. You noticed she was naked. I didn't even know, they've grown up around things. Nobody's born in a vacuum. I think probably they knew.
Thank you very much. Anyway.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask something else in terms of in relation to, well, ironically, female and male voices, sort of the irony of having worked on ties a little bit. I have the impression that the text is even more copied because of in that case, because of well, I'm not sure if it's Anthony the Great or another father called Anthony who features very much into it. And that seems to be the reason why the interest is there more than the actual female saint. And I wonder, I don't know, this Zosimus, is he a minor character in the story, or is that the reason why the text, what's going on there? I mean, sort of this play between the two characters.
Again, I'm answering on a Zoom call with other people who know this text far better than I do, but he's not, I don't know of him elsewhere. I mean, obviously Sophronius, the person to whom it's attributed, there's other, I was at the Byzantine Studies Conference here last weekend in Detroit and saw a couple papers about him, but Again, not to put you on the spot, Julie, but you might have an answer to this. I saw you smile like you might have an answer to this, but that's better than me.
No, I don't. But thanks for the confidence, though.
So I don't know of Zosimus outside of this text, although it's possible. He may just be a character.
I mean, there's another Zosimus, but I really think that's a different character by the same name.
Okay, and so within the text itself, he's also a minor character. I mean, the focus is really on Mary herself, and it just Zosimus is just someone meeting her, and that's okay. So it's a very different case. Okay, I was just
He's
curious
the
about that.
premise by which we get to go out to the desert and talk to her.
Yeah.
Like he's a setup for that. And he ironically finds out that the man he's been looking for who can surpass him in his discipline is a woman. Oh no, like they're definitely playing with that. So
yeah, in the Orthodox tradition, because this text gets read or gets commemorated in the week leading up to Easter, Zosimus is also a saint and has a backstory in hagiography. So yes, they get embellished a bit.
Thank you, Catherine. Okay, Dan.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much. Very, very interesting. My question would be about this rhetorical device exemplified by Libanius, the speech and character thingy. That what it does, it makes out of our character an author in a way. You get text that's not only about her, but also maybe depending on of how the framing of it all is, a bit more of an author. And my curiosity would be, is this applied in late antique hagiography to other women? And I'll tell you the background for my question is that we've been looking at the TeTra dossier, which literary dossier, which is very developed. There are many texts written about her, but in contrast to the rest of early Christian figures we look at that are connected to a main apostle, she never gets her own work. All of them get. Clement gets a lot, Dionysius gets a lot, so on and so forth. And there is a contrast between the fact that she doesn't get any authorial voice as on the top of a literary work. It's contrasted with the fact that it's the most copied of the whole hagiographic dossier in our project. So I'm curious. So there is a way, and I'm curious if this was used elsewhere.
So there is a moment in late antiquity, I would say, like, starting in the late 300s, 400s, that Christian writers notice that there aren't a lot of women speaking in their texts, and then they start to speak for. So, like, if you think about the explosion of poetry in Mary's voice, Mary, the mother of Jesus, the explosion of hymns in her voice, I would put. It's surprising that Thecla doesn't talk in that same way. Like, she's sort of the outlier. Very famously, and to the great anger of some people, I've also made this argument about Perpetua in the Passion of Perpetua and Felicity. And I recently got an email from, so I published an article in which I argued almost the same thing about Perpetua, that she is not, it's not her diary. This is not a woman in 203 who's writing something down in jail. Rather, this is a text that is, the first time we hear of it is Augustine mentions it. So it's sometime in Augustine's lifetime, someone has thought about the traditions around Perpetua, who's already being celebrated as a martyr. We know that from the Roman festal calendar of 354. They think about her and they think, well, what would it be like to be that woman that we talk about who was in jail and then she gets martyred? And then they write a speech for her. And if you look at Perpetua's diary, it does the same thing. It's like the diary. It's here's what used to happen to me, here's what's now happening, here's what's it follows that same pattern. So I wrote this article and I received an email from a colleague who teaches in your time zone, not my time zone, about an essay that he had written called Method and Madness in the Studies of Perpetua. And guess who was the method and guess who was the madness? Because I had said it wasn't actually a diary. Like, people get so upset when you say this. And I mean, rightfully so. I would like there to be lots more female Christian writers that I could study. I think most of the women's voice, I'm with Julia Hillner, most of the women's voices that we encounter from antiquity are characters that are being written by people. That's not to say that there couldn't be a female writer. But I think when you encounter them and they're so heavily written, you know, it's when in The Passion of Perpetua and Felicity, there's a tension to, oh no, I've been breastfeeding and now I'm going to be killed and what will happen to my child? Like, I've never had children, but the women I know who have children probably wouldn't write that if they're being killed at that moment. You know, it's just it's so heavy. So I'm surprised and I wonder, Dan, do you have a sense about why Thecla doesn't get this same kind of voice that other women do?
I haven't a clue. No, we've been trying to theorize it in a variety of ways. Here, she just gets a couple more lines in text about her. Maybe we'll have a more informed response to these sort of things towards the end of the project after we've looked at all these figures and how they are developed. But it's really strange because she is sent out into one of these texts at the end to teach in one of the texts about her. There is a basis, and now we know from your scholarship and from the presentation today that this can happen. There are ways to do it that were taught in the rhetorical school. So it's very strange that we don't have her. Just something.
It's always hard to come up with the answer for why something didn't happen. You know, that's hard, but I hope that you do.
We'll see. But yeah,
Does
thank
it
you.
have maybe something because she was, even though she's like a proto-martyr in some texts, she actually doesn't really get mentioned that often among, you know, all the big names. And I just wonder whether it's because there was some sort of contestability about her orthodoxy and this very unusual relationship with Paul. I don't know. Yeah, she's a bit. I find it very difficult to get my head around what's going on with all the literature around Thecla, I have to admit, but yeah.
I think, Catherine Papadopoulos, you are the MVP of this call because you've been putting so many if you haven't looked at the chat, most of what we've been talking about at some point, either Mara or Catherine has linked to it in the chat, so you should go there if you're looking for sources. I love that feature of Zoom meetings. I love it because, you know, sometimes you're like, oh, I got to look that up, and somebody on the call has done it for you. Thank you for doing that.
A lovely collaboration so far. Georgia, do you want to ask your question?
It's fine, but I also saw that Sabrina has raised her hand, so we can give the floor to her, and if there's time, I'll go back to it.
Okay, Sabrina.
Yeah, I was wondering if you had looked at the connection with that story in the Ostoria Loziaca with this servant. She's like a cleaning slave in a nunnery. And there is a monk who has a revelation or dream, and the angel tells him, actually there is a nun that is more holy than you, and you should go find her in that nunnery. And he goes and he's looking for her, and nobody knows who he's talking about, because none of the nuns know that she's a holy person, because they mistreat her, they beat her, they do all kinds of nasty things to her until they found out that she's revealed through him again as the most holy person. And she's not talking. I don't think she talks much. And I think that in the end she runs away. But the motif of the man trying to find someone more holy, the monk trying to find a contestant, you know, someone who is better than him, is there. And also the nuns can only realize that she's a holy person through his presence, and he's it's a little bit of the Cinderella of the monastery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not part of this chapter, but boy, it should have been now that you narrate it, because I think so. Tina Sessa, who's a historian here, very famously used the what do you call the Roman martyr acts? the Gesta Martyrum, excuse me, like the 5th and 6th century sort of collections of martyr acts to trace some political thought among Roman Christians, like how they thought about the household, how they thought about experts being called into the household to do things. And I think hagiography has that same potential, meaning when you're presented with a story like this, and the story is very clearly trying to get you to be like, oh, isn't it ironic that it's the scrub nun, the scrub woman who's among the that is political thought on the part of an ancient person. It's not a treatise, it's not John Rawls or whatever, but it's like, it's definitely that person thinking through, I have a status that's known as holy. I'm aiming towards something like that. There's this entire group of people who are left out of it, and there's class on top of that. Let's make us, so the tension in stories is usually for me a place, whatever the story's trying to make tense and trying to resolve, is a place to be like, this is political thinking on the part of an ancient person. I can study that, even if it's not them just saying out loud what their political ambitions or their political structures are.
Yeah, in this case, I think Palladius, he's writing for the court, and especially also the women at the court. So there's lots of women in the Historia Lusiaca, but I find that it's a nice story.
And what gets me is, and the reason I wrote this chapter is, ancient people very clearly know on some level that people who are classified in various ways are still human and still very obviously capable of things. And yet they're living in a system where they don't act on that. And it's at moments like that in this story where it peaks out and you're like, no, they actually know what's happening. They know exactly how they've structured things, and they know exactly why it's not just.
Yeah, and I think if I remember correctly, but I might be wrong, I think that in this case, she's not only like a slave, she's also crazy. She's supposed to be crazy also, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Sophia has pointed out in the chat that in Syriac she's called Onesima. That might be useful for someone who hasn't seen the chat. All right.
Actually, yeah, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Sophia.
I just to add to it, actually, in Syriac it has more narrative than in Lasaic history, so it adds a lot, like a prehistory of that nun who fainted in the way the demonic possession. This is why she looked crazy, and so it's quite a peculiar story about like a noble woman who went into the desert, and then she decided so desert is not enough, and then to the monastery, because there she received more like humiliation from the sisters, and this is something that she received. And I think this in Syriac it published by Agnes Louis Smith, I think, and I think Georgia perhaps will say more on that because she works with the text, and I think it will be republished soon by Erin Walsh, as far as I understand.
Yes, exactly. She's taking care of the new edition with new fragments from the Syriac. Witnesses from the Syriac.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you very much, Ellen, for a wonderful talk. Thank you, everyone else, for joining this great conversation. Have a nice evening, day, morning, wherever you are. Thank you all for joining. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye, everybody.
Next time. Bye-bye. Thank you. Goodbye.
See everyone.